In the quiet hum of a small room in Albuquerque, New Mexico, two young men sat surrounded by the glow of computer screens. Their dream was simple, to put a computer on every desk and in every home, but that dream would ignite a revolution. From that modest beginning, Microsoft would grow into a force that shaped the digital world. It defined how we work, how we play, and how we connect. Its innovations built empires, sparked rivalries, and changed the course of history. This is not just a story about software, it's a story of vision, power, failure, and rebirth. It's about how one company's relentless pursuit of innovation reshaped civilization. From the brilliance of Bill Gates and Paul Allen to the transformative leadership of Satya Nadella, this is the complete journey. You're watching Brand World 360, and this is the untold story of how Microsoft became a global empire. The vision that started it all in the early 1970s. The world was on the brink of a digital awakening. Computers were massive machines locked away in universities and corporate laboratories, inaccessible, expensive, and mysterious. For most people, the idea of owning a computer was unimaginable. But for two young men from Seattle, that idea wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Their names were Bill Gates and Paul Allen, two childhood friends bound by curiosity, long nights of coding, and an unshakable belief that technology would one day reach every home and every desk. At a time when computers were built by engineers in lab coats, Gates and Allen were building them in their minds, inside dorm rooms, libraries, and garages. They weren't backed by corporations or venture capital. They were driven by obsession. Bill Gates was the analytical thinker, methodical, precise, and fiercely competitive. Paul Allen was the visionary, imaginative, soft-spoken, and fascinated by the future. Together, they would create one of the most influential companies in history. Their journey began at Lakeside School, a private school in Seattle, where a mysterious teletype terminal connected to a distant mainframe opened their eyes to a new world. For the first time, the teenage Gates and Allen could interact directly with a computer. They spent endless hours experimenting, writing code, and discovering the logic of the digital universe. But they weren't just learning, they were dreaming. They could see what others couldn't. In 1974, while most teenagers were still discovering rock music, Gates and Allen were reading about a new machine called the Altair 8800, a small, kit-based computer that could fit on a desk. For the first time, a personal computer existed. To most, the Altair was a hobbyist's toy. But to them, it was the future. Paul Allen saw the magazine cover that would change their lives. Popular Electronics. January 1975. On it, the Altair 8800 shone like a beacon of opportunity. Allen rushed to show Gates, who was then studying at Harvard. The two immediately recognized what this meant. The age of personal computing had arrived, and someone needed to make software for it. There was just one problem. They didn't have an Altair. They didn't even have the code, but that didn't stop them. Gates and Allen called Micro Instrumentation and Telemetry Systems, MITS, the company behind the Altair, and boldly claimed they had developed a version of the basic programming language that could run on the Altair. In reality, they hadn't written a single line of it yet. For the next 8 weeks, they worked day and night. Paul Allen coded on a simulator he built himself. Bill Gates refined every command, every line, every instruction. When Allen finally flew to Albuquerque to present the program, no one was sure it would even run, but when he typed run on the Altair's terminal, the screen flickered and it worked. That moment marked the birth of Microsoft. The name itself, coined by Allen, was short for microcomputer software. It was simple, direct, and revolutionary, much like the company itself. In 1975, Microsoft was officially founded in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Their goal was clear: to create software that would make computers useful for everyone. They were young, untested, and broke, but they were also standing at the intersection of imagination and inevitability. The world didn't yet realize it, but a new empire was being built, not on land or industry, but on code. Gates dropped out of Harvard to pursue Microsoft full-time. Convinced that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Allen handled the engineering, Gates handled the business, and together they set out to build the future of personal computing. At first, their success was modest. Microsoft's version of BASIC sold, but slowly. They wrote software for early hobbyist machines, constantly reinvesting every dollar into the dream. The late nights continued, the code grew longer, and the belief deeper, but their biggest break was still to come. In 1980, just 5 years after their humble beginning, IBM, the world's largest computer manufacturer, approached Microsoft. IBM wanted to enter the personal computer market, and they needed an operating system. What happened next would change the world forever. The small startup from Albuquerque was about to make a deal that would turn it into a global giant. The story of Microsoft was no longer about two friends coding in a garage. It was about shaping the digital destiny of an entire planet. The IBM deal, the moment that changed everything. 1980, the computing world was changing fast. The personal computer was no longer just a dream whispered by hobbyists, it was becoming an industry. IBM, one of the most respected and powerful corporations in the world, had dominated the mainframe era. Their machines powered banks, governments, and corporations. But the age of personal computing was rising, and IBM knew it couldn't ignore it any longer. They wanted in. And to do that, they needed software, specifically an operating system. At the time, Microsoft was still a small, relatively unknown company. They made programming languages, not operating systems. But Bill Gates, now 25, saw an opportunity so big it could redefine everything. When IBM's representatives arrived at Microsoft's modest offices, they weren't expecting much. The company was young, their team small, and their workspace far from the polished glass towers of IBM. But Gates impressed them immediately. He spoke with quiet authority, technical depth, and strategic precision. When IBM explained they were developing a new personal computer, the IBM PC, and needed an operating system to run it, Gates didn't hesitate. He told them Microsoft could deliver. There was only one issue. Microsoft didn't actually have one, but Bill Gates wasn't the kind of person to say no to opportunity. He quickly reached out to a small company in Seattle called Seattle Computer Products, which had developed an early operating system called QDOS, short for Quick and Dirty Operating System. Gates saw potential in it. Microsoft purchased the rights for $50,000, refined the code, and rebranded it as MS-DOS, Microsoft Disk Operating System. That decision would become one of the most profitable business moves in history. When IBM asked if they could buy MS-DOS outright, Gates proposed something revolutionary. Instead of selling it, Microsoft would license the software to IBM. This meant that IBM could include it on their PCs, but Microsoft would retain ownership, allowing them to license it to other computer manufacturers as well. It was a brilliant move. At the time, IBM's lawyers didn't fully understand the long-term implications. They agreed, assuming IBM would remain the dominant hardware maker forever. But the world of personal computers was moving faster than anyone could predict. In 1981, IBM launched the IBM PC, powered by Microsoft's MS-DOS. It became an instant success. Soon, every other hardware maker wanted to create IBM-compatible machines, and they needed MS-DOS to run them. Within a few short years, Microsoft software was running on nearly every PC in the world. The company's revenue skyrocketed. Gates' vision had become reality, but behind the scenes, something deeper was happening. Microsoft wasn't just supplying software, they were defining the standard. By keeping control of MS-DOS, Microsoft positioned itself at the center of the rapidly expanding personal computer industry. No matter who made the hardware, Dell, Compaq, or HP, they needed Microsoft. It was a silent empire built not through physical products, but through invisible lines of code. Bill Gates' leadership was both admired and feared. He was known for his relentless focus, demanding work ethic, and sharp intellect. Employees described meetings where Gates would question every assumption, challenge every idea, and dissect code line by line. It wasn't easy to work for him, but it was impossible not to learn from him. By the mid-1980s, Microsoft had become one of the most powerful software companies in the world. But Gates wasn't satisfied. He knew the future wasn't just in text-based systems like DOS. The next frontier was visual. Computers needed to become friendlier, easier to use, more intuitive, more human. That vision led to the creation of a new project, a graphical user interface that would change how people interacted with computers forever. It would soon be known as Microsoft Windows. The birth of Windows would ignite the biggest technology revolution the world had ever seen, and the fiercest rivalry in the history of computing. Windows, the revolution that changed everything. The year was 1983. Personal computers were no longer a niche hobby. They were becoming tools of work, education, and creativity. But there was one major problem. They were still intimidating. Operating a PC meant memorizing commands, typing lines of text, and understanding cryptic syntax. For most people, it felt mechanical, not human. Bill Gates understood this better than anyone. He knew that for computing to truly change the world, it had to be simple. It had to feel natural. It had to look like something anyone could use. That was the vision behind Microsoft Windows. While MS-DOS had made Microsoft a software powerhouse, it was Windows that would make it a household name, inspired by graphical systems being developed elsewhere. Most notably at Xerox PARC and Apple, Gates set out to bring a graphical interface to the masses. He imagined a world where instead of typing commands, users could point and click, where files could be moved, copied, or deleted with a single motion. Windows would make the computer visual, tactile, and alive, but not everyone believed in the idea. Inside Microsoft, some thought the project was too ambitious. Outside, competitors mocked it. Apple was already working on the Macintosh, a sleek machine with an elegant interface and powerful marketing behind it. Still, Gates pushed forward. He wasn't just competing with Apple, he was building an ecosystem that could live on every machine, not just one brand. In November 1985, after years of development, Windows 1.0 was finally released. It wasn't perfect. Critics called it clunky and slow. Some said it looked more like a toy than a serious operating system. But Gates wasn't discouraged. To him, Windows 1.0 was just the beginning. Each new version refined the experience, faster, smoother, and more capable. Windows 2.0 improved performance and added overlapping windows. Windows 3.0 introduced vibrant color graphics, smoother multitasking, and new possibilities. By the early 1990s, Windows 3.1 became a cultural phenomenon. It wasn't just software anymore, it was the standard. Offices, schools, and homes across the world were now running Windows. For millions of people, the first computer they ever touched greeted them with a simple screen, a blue background, a start button, a world of possibility. Microsoft wasn't just creating programs, it was defining how humans interacted with machines. But success also brought challenges. Apple accused Microsoft of copying the look and feel of the Macintosh interface. Legal battles erupted, and the rivalry between the two companies became legendary. In the press, it was often portrayed as a battle of personalities. Steve Jobs versus Bill Gates. Jobs was the artist, passionate, perfectionist, and driven by design. Gates was the strategist, logical, relentless, and focused on scale. The two men respected each other, but they were opposites in philosophy. Jobs wanted to control the entire experience, hardware and software together. Gates believed in open compatibility, letting anyone build machines that could run Windows. History would show that both were right, but in very different ways. By the mid-1990s, Microsoft had achieved what few companies ever had: near total market dominance. Over 90% of the world's computers were running Windows. It wasn't just an operating system anymore. It was the digital foundation of modern life. From homes to offices, from small startups to global corporations, Windows had become the invisible infrastructure of the digital age. And while millions of people clicked and typed their way into the future, Microsoft quietly built an empire, one license, one computer, one user at a time. But behind the scenes, The company was already preparing for its next chapter. Windows had conquered the desktop. Now, Microsoft wanted to conquer the World Wide Web. The next great technological war was about to begin, one that would test Microsoft's power, reshape the internet, and forever change the company's destiny. Power, competition, and the internet irradiated the mid-1990s. Microsoft stood at the summit of the tech world. Windows had become a household name. Every office desk, every home computer, every school lab, all ran on Microsoft software. Bill Gates was now the world's richest man, and Microsoft seemed unstoppable, but the story of technology is never still. Just when a company believes it has conquered the world, something new emerges to rewrite the rules. For Microsoft, that something was the internet. In the early years, the internet was chaotic and slow, a maze of text-based connections and obscure commands. It wasn't yet a mainstream idea, but Gates saw it coming. He knew that this new digital frontier could either empower Microsoft or destroy it. At first, however, even Gates underestimated it. In 1994, as the internet quietly began to explode in popularity, Microsoft was still focused on software and operating systems. The company believed that people would use computers primarily through local programs, not online networks. But then in 1995, everything changed. That year, a company named Netscape launched a program called Netscape Navigator, the first popular web browser. It allowed users to explore websites easily with just a few clicks. Suddenly, the internet wasn't just for researchers or programmers. It was for everyone. The internet had become a window into the world, and Microsoft realized that if it didn't move fast, someone else would own that window. Gates pivoted the company overnight. He issued a now famous internal memo titled the Internet Tidal Wave. In it, he warned his employees that the internet was the most important development since the personal computer, and that Microsoft had to lead it. Within months, Microsoft developed its own browser, Internet Explorer. It was integrated directly into Windows, a move that made it instantly accessible to hundreds of millions of users. This aggressive strategy crushed Netscape. Over the next few years, Internet Explorer became the dominant browser, capturing more than 90% of the market. But this success came at a cost. In 1998, the U.S. Department of Justice filed an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft, accusing the company of using its monopoly power to stifle competition. It was a defining moment, a battle not just over software, but over the very nature of the digital economy. Microsoft was portrayed as a giant that had grown too powerful, too controlling. The government argued that bundling Internet Explorer with Windows gave Microsoft an unfair advantage over other browsers. The trial was long, public, and damaging. For the first time, Microsoft's invincible image began to crack. Yet even amid controversy, the company continued to innovate. Windows 95 had already transformed the user experience, introducing the Start menu and the graphical world millions grew to love. Now, Microsoft was expanding beyond computers. It entered the world of business software with Microsoft Office, a suite that became essential in every workplace: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. Soon, Microsoft wasn't just powering computers. It was powering entire organizations. But change was brewing. A new wave of technology companies was emerging, nimble startups led by young visionaries. Google, Amazon, and Apple's revival under Steve Jobs would soon redefine innovation. The internet era wasn't just about software anymore. It was about data, search, mobility, and experience. For the first time, Microsoft found itself no longer the disruptor, but the incumbent. As the 2000s began, the world moved online. The internet became faster, the devices became smaller, and Microsoft, despite its size and resources, struggled to adapt. Bill Gates, now a global icon, began to step away from daily operations, focusing more on philanthropy and long-term vision. In 2000, he passed the role of CEO to Steve Ballmer, his longtime friend and colleague, a man known for his energy, loyalty, and intensity. Ballmer inherited a giant, but one facing its first true test. The rise of Google marked a shift in power. Search became the new gateway to the web, and Google dominated it effortlessly. Apple, under Jobs, returned with the iPod, iTunes, and later the iPhone, redefining what technology could feel like. Microsoft, meanwhile, was seen as powerful but stagnant. Windows XP was successful, but later versions like Vista struggled to impress. For the first time in its history, Microsoft seemed uncertain about the future. Yet even in this period of turbulence, the seeds of reinvention were quietly being planted. Inside Microsoft, a new generation of engineers and leaders began to think differently about cloud computing, mobile technology, and artificial intelligence. They were preparing for a future where computing wouldn't be limited to one machine or one desk, but would exist everywhere. And when the time came, Microsoft would rise again, stronger, smarter, and more connected than ever. The fall and reinvention of Microsoft. By the early 2000s, Microsoft was at a crossroads. It was still powerful, unimaginably so. Windows and Office dominated the corporate world. Every business, every classroom, every government relied on Microsoft software. But outside that fortress of dominance, the world was changing. Fast, a new digital landscape was forming. The internet was evolving into a living ecosystem. Search engines, social media, smartphones, and online platforms were taking center stage. And for the first time in its history, Microsoft was no longer leading the revolution, it was chasing it. The first cracks began to appear in the early 2000s. While Microsoft focused on maintaining Windows and Office, other companies began defining the next frontier. Google was rewriting the rules of information, turning search into an empire. Apple was reborn under Steve Jobs, blending technology with art and emotion. And Amazon quietly built a new infrastructure for the digital age, one that would soon reshape computing itself. Microsoft, meanwhile, released Windows Vista in 2007, a project that was meant to be revolutionary but became a symbol of stagnation. It was slow, heavy, and unstable. Critics tore it apart, and users longed for the simplicity of Windows XP, for a company once seen as unstoppable. This was a humbling moment. Bill Gates had already begun stepping back from his daily role to focus on global philanthropy through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His influence remained, but the vision of the company began to shift under new leadership. Steve Ballmer, passionate and bold, tried to push Microsoft into new arenas: mobile phones, entertainment, and enterprise. Some bets paid off. Others didn't. In 2001, Microsoft launched the Xbox, entering the gaming market dominated by Sony and Nintendo. At first, it seemed like an unlikely move for a software company, but it became one of Microsoft's smartest decisions. The Xbox transformed Microsoft's image from a cold corporate giant to a brand capable of fun, creativity, and culture. With Halo, Xbox Live, and an emerging gaming community, Microsoft captured an entirely new generation. Yet, while gaming thrived, other divisions struggled. The mobile revolution was the company's biggest missed opportunity. In 2007, when Apple unveiled the iPhone, Microsoft executives laughed it off. Ballmer famously dismissed it, saying no one would pay $500 for a phone without a keyboard. But the iPhone wasn't just a phone, it was a platform. And when Google followed with Android, the mobile revolution had begun. Microsoft tried to catch up with Windows Phone, but it was too late. Developers ignored it, consumers overlooked it, and the world had already moved on. It was a harsh reminder that dominance in one era doesn't guarantee survival in the next. By 2013, Microsoft had become a paradox. It was one of the richest companies on earth, yet it felt lost. The culture had grown bureaucratic. The innovation that once defined it had dulled. That same year, Steve Ballmer announced his resignation as CEO. The company needed fresh leadership, a new vision, someone who could rediscover Microsoft's soul. That person was Satya Nadella. When Nadella took over in 2014, few outside the company knew what to expect. Soft-spoken, thoughtful, and deeply technical, Nadella brought a different kind of leadership. Calm, collaborative, and quietly visionary, he understood that Microsoft couldn't cling to the past. It had to reinvent itself, from a software company into a cloud-first, AI-driven global platform. His strategy was simple but profound. Instead of competing with everyone, Microsoft would start partnering. Instead of locking users into Windows, it would open its tools to all devices and platforms. And at the center of this transformation was one word: cloud. Microsoft's Azure platform became the new backbone of the company, offering cloud computing power to businesses, developers, and governments around the world. This time, Microsoft wasn't chasing the trend, it was leading it. Nadella also redefined the company's culture. The era of corporate rivalry gave way to collaboration. He encouraged learning, empathy, and purpose. He shifted the focus from competition to contribution, and it worked. Under Nadella, Microsoft made bold acquisitions: LinkedIn in 2016, GitHub in 2018, Activision Blizzard years later, cementing its dominance in gaming. Each move reflected a broader strategy to build an ecosystem that connected work, play, and creativity across every screen and every cloud. Microsoft was no longer just the maker of Windows. It had become the silent infrastructure of the digital age, powering AI models, enterprise servers, and global communication. The company's transformation was one of the greatest comebacks in business history. From being seen as outdated and out of touch, Microsoft had reinvented itself into a modern tech powerhouse, grounded in vision, humility, and innovation. And yet, this wasn't the end. As the world entered a new technological era, powered by artificial intelligence, automation, and quantum computing, Microsoft stood once again at the center of it all, a company born from code, reborn through vision. The cloud empire, Azure, and the futurist rise of Microsoft's cloud empire was more than a business transformation. It was a philosophical one. For decades, Microsoft had defined itself through physical software, boxes, disks, and licenses that powered the world's computers. But as the 2010s unfolded, that model began to fade. The world was shifting towards something invisible: the cloud, a boundless digital layer where storage, computing, and intelligence lived online. Satya Nadella saw what few others did. He understood that the cloud was not just a tool, it was the next operating system for the planet. And that's how Azure became Microsoft's new heartbeat. When it launched in 2010, Azure was just one of many experiments. Amazon Web Services had a huge head start, and Google's cloud division was emerging as a strong competitor. But Microsoft had something the others didn't: decades of trust from businesses, governments, and developers around the world. Nadella and his team leveraged that trust masterfully. They offered a bridge between the old and the new, a way for traditional companies to step into the future without fear. Azure promised stability, security, and scalability. It wasn't just storage, it was intelligence. It could host data, run artificial intelligence, and power the next generation of applications. Soon, major institutions began to migrate their operations to Azure. Banks, hospitals, and even national governments began relying on Microsoft's digital infrastructure. Behind the scenes, Microsoft was no longer just a software company. It had quietly become the digital backbone of the modern world. But Nadella's vision went beyond technology. It was about culture. He once said, "We want to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more." That phrase became Microsoft's new mantra. It wasn't just marketing. It was a shift in identity. Instead of focusing on dominating markets, Microsoft began building ecosystems. Office 365 became a cloud-based suite. Windows evolved into a service rather than a product. Teams connected workforces around the world, and Edge redefined browsing with collaboration at its core. This wasn't the old Microsoft. This was a new kind of global institution, one that thrived by lifting others up. Still, transformation came with challenges. As Microsoft grew into a cloud empire, it had to confront issues of privacy, data ethics, and global regulation. Governments demanded accountability. Users demanded transparency. In this new digital age, trust became the currency of success. Microsoft's approach was to balance power with responsibility, focusing on cybersecurity, responsible AI, and sustainability. It invested billions in renewable energy to power its data centers and pledged to become carbon negative by 2030. In an industry driven by speed and scale, Microsoft chose sustainability and ethics as its differentiators. By the late 2010s, the numbers told their own story. Azure had become one of the top-to-cloud platforms in the world. Microsoft's market value crossed $1 trillion, then to $1 trillion, making it one of the most valuable companies in history. But perhaps the greatest victory wasn't financial. It was philosophical. Microsoft had rediscovered its place in the world, not as the ruler of technology, but as its architect. Its systems powered hospitals, schools, startups, and research institutions. It wasn't about controlling innovation anymore. It was about enabling it. Then came the next revolution, artificial intelligence. For decades, I had been a dream that hovered at the edge of possibility. But the 2020s turned that dream into a race. And once again, Microsoft was ready. Instead of trying to build everything alone, Nadella partnered. He saw potential in the small but promising AI company called OpenAI. Together, they began shaping the next chapter of human-computer interaction, blending natural language, creativity, and intelligence in ways the world had never seen, from Copilot to chat integrations. Microsoft began embedding AI into everything, from Word and Excel to the cloud itself. The partnership wasn't just strategic, it was symbolic. It represented a new Microsoft, adaptive, collaborative, and forward-looking. By the early 2020s, Microsoft's ecosystem was vast and seamless. Its products weren't confined to a single device or OS. They lived across clouds, across borders, across human lives. When you typed in Word, stored on OneDrive, collaborated in Teams, or ran machine learning models on Azure, you were, in some way, connected to Microsoft's digital fabric. The company had achieved something rare, relevance across generations. Those who once saw it as outdated now saw it as essential. As we look deeper, the scale of Microsoft's empire becomes clear. Its data centers span continents. Its AI research pushes the boundaries of what's possible. Its influence reaches classrooms, corporations, and governments. And yet, it does so quietly, not as the loudest company in tech, but as one of the most stable and trusted. Microsoft had become, in essence, the operating system of the modern world, invisible yet indispensable. But the story doesn't end here, because every empire faces its next challenge. And for Microsoft, that challenge lies in shaping the future responsibly, guiding technology toward humanity, not away from it. As AI grows, as automation deepens, as data becomes destiny, the world will once again look to the company from Redmond for direction. Can Microsoft balance innovation with ethics? Can it continue empowering people without overpowering them? Only time will tell. Beyond the horizon, Microsoft's legacy and the future of technology. The story of Microsoft is not just a chronicle of innovation or wealth. It is, at its core, a reflection of human ambition, the unending desire to shape the future. From a small Albuquerque office in 1975 to a global empire spanning every corner of the digital world, Microsoft's journey mirrors the rise of modern civilization itself, bold, flawed, transformative, and deeply human. But as the world stands at the threshold of an AI-driven era, the question is no longer how Microsoft built its empire. It's how that empire will guide the next age. The company that once made software for machines now creates tools that think, learn, and reason. Through artificial intelligence, Microsoft is redefining not just what technology can do, but what humanity can become. With Azure AI, OpenAI collaborations, and Copilot integration, Microsoft has positioned itself at the very heart of the AI revolution. It's not just building systems, it's building companions, digital assistants capable of amplifying human creativity, solving global problems, and even shaping decision-making at planetary scale. But with that power comes weight, a moral and philosophical one. Because AI isn't just code, it's reflection. It mirrors our choices, our ethics, our biases, and our hopes. And Microsoft, more than any company on Earth, must now navigate that responsibility. Inside Redmond, the conversation has shifted. The focus is no longer on dominating markets, it's on shaping the world responsibly. The company's leaders speak of empowerment rather than control, of ethics rather than expansion. Satya Nadella has often said, "The true test of our technology is not whether it makes us more productive, but whether it makes us more human." That statement captures the heart of Microsoft's modern mission. It's not simply about the cloud, or AI, or even innovation. It's about the relationship between people and technology, a relationship that must be built on trust, transparency, and empathy. In classrooms across Africa, students use low-cost Windows laptops powered by Microsoft's cloud to learn coding. In hospitals, Azure AI helps doctors analyze medical data in seconds, saving lives. In small businesses, Teams connects remote workers from every continent, collapsing the boundaries of distance and time. Microsoft's reach today is not about dominance. It's about presence, quiet, consistent, and deeply integrated into daily life. It no longer screams innovation. It whispers it through the subtle hum of servers, the seamless sync of files, and the silent efficiency of algorithms that power our modern existence. Yet even as it thrives, Microsoft's story remains unfinished. The future is uncertain, defined by forces no one can fully predict. Quantum computing, augmented reality, decentralized systems, and advanced AI all promise to reshape the rules once again, and history has shown that empires, no matter how vast, must evolve or fade. The challenge for Microsoft will be the same as it was in the beginning: to remain curious, adaptable, and visionary in a world that never stops changing. But there's something different this time. The company is no longer chasing technology. It's guiding it with humility born from experience and a renewed sense of purpose. In a world of constant noise, Microsoft has learned the art of quiet influence. It doesn't always dominate headlines, yet its impact echoes everywhere, in the clouds above us, in the devices we hold, and in the code that shapes our reality. The company has moved beyond Windows, beyond Office, beyond software. It has become an ecosystem of possibility, connecting people, data, and intelligence in ways that make the world smaller, smarter, and more connected. When future historians look back at the early digital age, Microsoft's name will not just appear as a corporation. It will stand as a symbol of evolution. The company that grew from youthful ambition into global stewardship. From the dream of two young programmers writing code for a machine, to a global network empowering billions through invisible intelligence. It is the story of how technology and humanity intertwined, and how one company helped define that relationship. In the end, Microsoft's legacy won't be measured in stock prices or product launches. It will be measured in impact, in the tools it created, the connections it forged, and the opportunities it unlocked for generations yet to come. It began with a vision, a computer on every desk and in every home. And today, that vision has evolved, not just into computers, but into an intelligent world, powered by the cloud, guided by ethics, and inspired by the limitless curiosity of the human spirit. This is Microsoft, a company that didn't just survive the digital age, it defined it. And in doing so, it became not only a business empire, but a living blueprint of innovation, resilience, and reinvention.